My name is Brian, and you suck at van building. You do. You're awful, and that's why you're here. Okay, let's get started. Welcome back to Giant Travels by Van. Today my goal is to make you not suck at van building. Remember to enter in the comments if you think you know where today's intro inspiration came from. I watched 100 van build videos before ever deciding to build my van, and I saw some pretty unsafe practices being used. So today I want to talk about the wrong and right ways to build inside your van to keep yourself safe. One of the things I never saw discussed in any van build video was whether the construction itself could survive even a low-speed crash without any of the objects they built tearing loose and becoming a danger to the driver or occupants. So while it's very important that when you load your van before any trip, that you tie down any heavy objects so that they're not a danger, it's even more critical how you build your van so that the structural elements and cabinets you place in it can't become a worse danger. We're going to talk about some of the safest methods to use in building your van. Let's get started. All right, I want to talk first about structural strength and fastening into the sheet metal in your van. I have some sheet metal here, and it's thinner than the metal in your van, but I'm going to use it to illustrate some important points. The primary attachment methods I've seen everyone using is self-tapping or regular sheet metal screws, like this one. In my opinion, these should never be used for attaching large or heavy structural elements in your van. While they're fine for putting something up like a piece of wood trim, they should not be used for major pieces like cabinetry. Here's why. It starts with how these are attached, where several things can go wrong and weaken them to the point of being already close to failure. If you're using regular sheet metal screws, like this one, then you have to drill the hole first. So if you do use these in your build, be certain to use the proper size drill bit, which ideally should be just smaller than the body of the screw, which is the part inside the threads. Here's a tool tip to easily select drill bit sizes for screws. Take one of the screws and the drill bit you're interested in and hold it up towards a light source and position the drill bit behind the screw. As you hold or even move the bit slightly back and forth, you should be able to see how closely it matches the screw's inner diameter. Again, ideally it should be slightly smaller than the screw body, so that the sheet metal will essentially be stretched open a bit to allow the threads to pass. This will give you the strongest attachment possible. But fastening these screws, and even more so, fastening self-tapping screws, is where the problems can really begin. To save time, most people are going to use either a drill or hex impact driver like this to attach these screws. In both cases, it's critical that you don't overdrive the screw, which actually starts stripping out the hole and weakening the attachment. This can be hard to do because you need the screw to be pretty snug, but there's a fine line between that and a turn or two more and starting to weaken the connection. And while that's easier with a drill that has an adjustable clutch setting like this, every size of screw, every thickness of metal has a different ideal clutch setting. And if you're using the same drill to drill the hole as to drive the screw, then every single time you're going to have to remember to change the clutch setting. For those using a hex impact driver, this is even harder to not do, since most of these do not include an adjustable clutch, and since they have more torque and a faster rotation speed, they easily have the power to quickly strip the sheet metal with the threads of the screw. So here's another tool tip for you. First, if you're shopping for tools to build your van, let me recommend that I actually think a hex impact driver is the single most flexible and useful tool you can own if you can afford only to choose between a drill and a hex driver. Let me explain. If you compare the specs of any hex driver with any drill, you'll see that they have way more torque and even a faster max rotation speed, which is still variable by trigger press. That makes it a better and more flexible tool. While that's much better than any drill, you might ask, what about the clutch, so that you don't overdrive screws, and what about using drill bits? That's where this comes in. A $13 DeWalt clutch for hex drivers. Just insert this in your hex driver, and now you have a ready clutch that you can enable or disable by simply sliding it back or forth. It's on when pulled towards the hex driver, and it's off when pulled away. This is highly rated on Amazon and has worked flawlessly for me. As for using drill bits, for $11 you can pick up a keyless chuck that just inserts into your hex driver, and now you can use loose drill bits rather than just the limited size that come ready for hex mounting. Both of these add-ons together turn any hex driver into a much better and more capable tool than a drill without sacrificing features. Check the links below the video for these add-ons from my Amazon affiliate channel, and you'll be supporting my upcoming trip videos while traveling to Alaska from Florida. Now, depending on the budget you're working under, I definitely agree that if you can afford it, having both a drill and a hex driver is better. This way you can reach for either tool and go to work with a drill bit in one and whatever fastener you need in the other. But you may still want to consider these attachments to gain the speed and torque benefits of your hex driver, especially the clutch to not overdrive screws. Also, the faster rotation speed over a drill will make drilling holes in sheet metal go much faster with the hex driver. I'll also mention I've been very happy with Black & Decker tools for literally decades, and I think it's hard to beat their 20-volt lithium system with all the different shop as well as garden tools they make that use the interchangeable batteries. My affiliate link below will also take you into Black & Decker tool heaven if that's what you finally want to spend some of those lotto dollars on that you've been hoarding. Okay, back to the do's and don'ts of fasteners, because we're about to get to the best parts. The biggest problems with using sheet metal screws for heavy structural items in your van are twofold: vibration and rust. If you use sheet metal screws, you're essentially hoping that over thousands of miles of road bumps and potholes that the screw is going to hold just as well as the day it was inserted. The problem with that is, most of the time these screws are not driven fully up to the metal that they depend on to grip, but rather they get to the metal through some thickness of wood, like this. So any force that shifts the wood, like a pothole, puts tremendous angular force on the sheet metal holding the screw and will weaken the attachment over time. Remember, thousands of miles means thousands of bumps. Secondly, the use of a sheet metal screw creates a bare metal surface in the sheet metal. In most any van build, you'll see nearly everyone encouraging you to protect any bare metal surfaces you create from rust. The act of drilling a hole to insert a sheet metal screw is creating metal unprotected from rust in the most critical area, which is where the screw needs to maintain its holding force. So my solution is to simply not use sheet metal screws for anything other than light duty attachment within my van build. Instead, I recommend riv nuts. Riv nuts are what commercial van outfitters use to attach heavy items like steel shelving in any trade van. Riv nuts are ideal for van builds and exceed the tear out and shear strength of sheet metal screws. And they're not subject to the wear and tear of vibration. Since they attach so well to the sheet metal, they'll actually flex the sheet metal under enough force. Lastly, it's simple to protect the bare metal created when you drill the hole for a riv nut from rust. So let me show you how I install them. First of all, you want to use an appropriately sized drill bit that just barely lets the riv nut insert into the hole for maximum strength. Riv nuts are attached by means of a special tool that you thread the riv nut onto, insert it in the hole, and close the tool to compress the riv nut. I haven't threaded it all the way down here so you can see the action that the tool does to pull in on the riv nut and collapse it behind the metal. It also has the advantage of being a threaded connection so that you can remove and reinsert the attachment bolt that you used as many times as you want. Something else that is a weakness with sheet metal screws, because removing and attaching them multiple times will weaken the connection. To create a moisture barrier and prevent future rust when installing a riv nut, I use a bit of silicone from a resealable tube and spread it around the riv nut all the way around just before I insert it in the hole and tighten it down. Doing so lets the silicone spread out around the riv nut and completely seals it to keep moisture away from the bare metal that you've created. My affiliate link will show you the lowest cost 4-star rated riv nut tool that will insert 4 different sizes of riv nut on Amazon for $24. I also have links to the sizes of riv nut that you'll need, and don't go crazy buying them. Depending on your build, you may only need a dozen or so of the larger size and 2 dozen or so of the smaller size. I use these with stainless steel screws from the local orange big box store. That way I can determine the best length to use for each screw that I need in the build. Remember to always check where you plan to drill. You need enough space in the cavity to insert the rib nut, but you want to drill each hole with controlled pressure so that the bit barely moves into the hole once drilled, so that you don't risk ramming the bit into the outside van skin. At some point, every van build ends up using wood that you need to securely attach to the van. Whether it's a store-bought or custom-made bit of cabinetry down to just some simple shelving, it's important to again think about structural strength. My opinion is that wood screws should never be used in any part of your van build, other than again for the very lightest of construction. I'd always recommend using them at least with another connection method, such as wood glue. So while it's fine to use pocket screws to attach a face frame to the front of some cabinets, I would still recommend using glue for added strength. Today's wood glues are actually stronger than the wood fibers. But I want to again focus on attaching heavy items like cabinets in your van. So if you've ruled out sheet metal screws for this purpose on the van wall side, it's now time to rule out wood screws, since they would be even weaker than sheet metal screws and much less durable under continued vibration while driving the van. To attach wood in your van, I believe you should always use small bolts that pass entirely through the wood, and then use washers to spread the load out on the other side. Here's some examples. I bought these angle brackets in a bulk pack from my local orange big box store. The bolts are stainless steel and have nuts with nylon inserts so that they friction bind when tightened to not vibrate loose over time. This creates tremendously more holding strength when combined with riv nuts on the sheet metal side, and can give you the best possible chance of going through an accident without a catastrophic failure. You can see that on a major structural element like this, I use both holes for strength. This will literally have to tear the plywood apart before this is going to allow the cabinet to detach from the wall. Finally, I want to quickly also talk about wood materials used in your build. The absolute worst thing I've seen in a build video is someone installing a big box store prefabricated particle board cabinet, such as you would use in a bathroom or kitchen. I want to be very clear. Particle board and particle board cabinets have no place in a van build. The very nature of particle board makes it prone to break down in time due to vibration. I've literally watched a video where an 8-foot long particle board kitchen cabinet was attached into a van using only some sheet metal screws through the particle board along its back and into the van's sheet metal. Once you load such a cabinet up with kitchen utensils, a 30 to 50 pound water jug and other items, you've just created a potential death trap for even a low-speed crash. It is simply not worth the risk. The only way I would suggest that anyone even consider using a particle board cabinet would be if you cut and glued 1/2-inch plywood into the inside and in every corner so as to reinforce it structurally and give you a plywood surface to bolt through to riv nuts. So you should be using plywood in your builds. Depending on the structural strength you need, this can be a mix of 3/4 inch for the highest strength, such as vertical supports, and in building the largest items such as full-size cabinetry, to 1/2-inch plywood for drawers and areas that you need less than the strength of 3/4, and you can shave some weight off by using it in place of it. And right down to 1/4-inch plywood for things like dividers and cabinets where their contribution to structural strength isn't needed at all. I hope today's discussion of fasteners and materials that you use in your build will not only make it better, but will critically make it safer. Alright, thanks for watching today. I hope you learned some things about van building that'll make your van build not only better, but also safer to operate. No one wants to think about the eventuality of having an accident while they're driving their van, and the simple fact that you've put a lot of money and time into the conversion may make you a better driver. But remember, it's not always about you. Sometimes it's about the other guy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below if you have any questions, and I'll see if I can answer them. We've got a lot more van building to do, and I'll be covering new topics every episode. Thanks. Finally, for those wondering about the inspiration for today's intro, That comes from a very old comedy series on YouTube called You Suck at Photoshop. I have a link to their first episode below, so you may enjoy watching those. And a big shout out to Donnie for his inspiration and new ways to use Photoshop that none of us may have imagined. See you all soon. I watched 100 van build videos before ever deciding to build my van, and I saw some pretty safe practices being used. Or would they tear loose and become death-defying badness? One of the things I never saw presented or discussed was